everyone. We're back with another episode of Touchgrass Podcast. Today we have Vishal from True Markets. He's the founder of True Markets, and we could talk about all about his journey at Coinbase, Circle, building an exchange platform, and a lot of things on the trading side of things. And welcome to the show, Vishal.
Good to be here, guys. Thank you.
Congratulations on the raise. Just for everyone's context, we've been trying to schedule this for a while. So I'm very, very excited to chat with you. Vishal, I think what would be super helpful is if you can go a little bit into your background,
Yeah.
talk to us about how you got here and then talk to us about, the months after the raise. I'm pretty sure it's been crazy for you
Yeah,
guys.
sure, for sure. Background was a computer engineer, graduated in the dot-com bust, ended up on Wall Street. I was actually at Goldman for many years on the electronic trading side. So I met my co-founder there 17 years ago. We were the team that built, we helped build out one of the first ATSs. We were really highly focused in the US listed options world. So we were building, I ended up running that business. We built out institutional businesses, what we call execution services, so routing businesses, but also we would handle payment for order flow type businesses as well, retail aggregation, all the other things that we would see. I pivoted, I went to a market maker. I pivoted towards fintech and crypto. My co-founder and I had worked together many times. I went to a small fintech startup by the name of Moneyline. It was small at the time. It went back a couple years back. Then I joined Circle as head of business development, but more importantly, head of USDC at the time where it hadn't launched yet. It was still just a white paper, and we were trying to figure out, how do we get it on exchanges? How do we manage liquidity? How do we get OTC trade desks to leverage it? And the reality is, there were very few people on Circle's team that had a markets background, so I stepped in. So we took it from 0 to $500 million in market cap. I left Circle to join Coinbase a couple months later. So we took it, we took USDC from 0 to $500 million in market cap. This is during ZERP, so it's still not a big money maker. It's just kind of we're trying to figure out what's next. Circle had offloaded Poloniex to Justin Sun. The trade desk was sold to Kraken, and they pivoted the entire business towards USDC. And so, the writing was on the wall that I was going to go from having no bosses to all the bosses at one time. And, it felt like a good time to take a leave. Coinbase was pre-IPO. One of my old bosses from Goldman, his name is Greg Tusar. He was a chief guy at Tagomi, and they were purchased around the same time. I ended up working for a gentleman by the name of Surjit Chatterjee, who was a chief product officer. And, he really drove us to think differently. A couple of things that we did, we were focused on the Amazon of assets. So we took Coinbase from 20 assets to 235 assets listed. So if you remember back in the day, you wouldn't be able to trade many assets at Coinbase. The infrastructure itself wasn't very good. So the matching engine wasn't great. So one of my first hires was Patrick, my co-founder, who, he's at True Markets has built his 7th matching engine. So he's kind of an expert at that. Helped kind of scale that US spot market, again, from 20 assets to 235. We unified USD and USDC, so you could kind of use one for the other. And that kind of initiated the rest of the org to look at USD and USDC as the same, because if the exchange can speak it, then the rest of the platform can speak it. I led the team that architected the purchase of FairX, which is one of the largest acquisitions in crypto, CFTC regulated DCM. So we launched it as Coinbase Derivative Exchange out of the United States. And within 6 months, we launched Coinbase Perpetual Futures, or Coinbase International Exchange. This is pre-FTX. We made the decision to launch it pre-FTX blowing up, and we launched it afterwards. And I stuck around for the launch of that, and I left to raise capital and build my own business. And that's where we land.
That's pretty cool. I think with everything that's going on in the stablecoin landscape, I think it's really important to remember how the US stablecoin sort of market evolved. Is this the same era where Balaji was creating all those USDC videos for Coinbase and he was like the face of it?
So the funny thing is, I'm at the time at the Circle side negotiating with Coinbase on like rev splits and things like that, and we were more focused on like boots on the ground and like listen, like I was there even before Coinbase signed up, right? So there was a lot of like preliminary work, and I think history gets rewritten a bunch of times, and like there's a very small crew of people that actually got USDC off the ground. I'd say the Coinbase team did a lot of work, and honestly, like without Coinbase, you wouldn't have real retail rails to handle. ACH and debits are quite hard, and they do a really good job for fraud prevention and kind of making those things work. But yeah, I mean, it was a combined effort. I don't think USDC would have worked well without both teams.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. I think this is the first time I'm talking to someone who's worked at both Circle and Coinbase.
There's very few of us, by the way. There's
Yeah.
very few of us, yeah.
And then I like becoming a founder. Then was there, first of all, like was there a culture difference between like the Circle team and the Coinbase team, like from a fundamental perspective, like I would say like mindset wise?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to the Coinbase side. So I think Brian is a remarkable leader. I publicly stated that like my Coinbase job was probably my favorite job I've ever had, and I've worked at Goldman Sachs, I've worked at Circle, I've worked at a bunch of places. The one thing I liked about the way Brian led was he really trusted you. So he would dub you a directly responsible individual. You're like the CEO of the exchange business. If you think we need to launch a perpetual futures exchange, he's gonna he's gonna knock down Wall Street, but you're still gonna be the primary. You're still the guy in the driver's seat, but he's going to sit next to you and knock down the really heavy walls and enable you, right? Like, because he knows I'm hiring the best people that know stablecoins or exchanges or lending businesses, and he may not be that guy, but he can knock down those walls for us. So he subscribes to the idea of directly responsible individual, and having someone like Brian Armstrong sitting next to you and kind of helping you achieve your goals makes things a lot easier, to be honest. So. I think that's something I'd like to carry into my new company. There's a lot of ethoses from Coinbase I'd like to carry over. I mean, they're things like clear communications. You can see their supreme focus on mission. That's like stuff that I loved and I would take away.
Is there something about the Coinbase time? Like, there's obviously like this Coinbase Mafia that's arose. Like, do you guys ever just get together like, hey, we're the Coinbase Mafia? Like, what was it about the culture that sort of drove a lot of these entrepreneurs after? Because one thing that I've noticed about like Indian ecosystem, like at least startups, like my friends when they worked and I used to work in the ecosystem, a lot of the founders don't want to lose talent. Whereas when I look at like the Coinbase culture, it feels very diverse to a point where we are very happy to see someone build their own thing.
Yeah.
What was about Coinbase's culture that sort of promoted that?
Yeah, I mean, number one, we do meet. So they just had the Coinbase State of the Crypto Summit, and the day before they had a big alumni founders event. So like literally just Coinbase Mafia, the people that are building in the space. And that leads into a couple things. Like, well, first, I'd say that the exec team, specifically Brian, was very good about saying, you did a great job in scaling the exchange business. I hope we get to invest in whatever you do next. I hope you succeed, but if you don't, please come back. And like those types of like mentalities are like different than other people that I've seen and other people I've worked with. So that like you almost have a zero call option on your career, knowing that if you can do a great job at Coinbase, like listen, like there's a lot of boomerangs that come back. And I'd also say in the Coinbase Mafia itself, it allows us to scale really quickly. So I'm building very much like an exchange execution brokerage system, but we're non-custodial, right? Like we use Paxos as a qualified custodian. We may use Coinbase at some point, but we use Turnkey behind the scenes, and Turnkey are a bunch of Coinbase Mafia. And like I've worked with those guys before. It's an easy call. It reminds me a lot of the early days of Goldman Sachs, where we had this analyst training program where they would like shuttle everybody from Hong Kong and London, New York, and they put us into a room, and we would go like, we'd wake up, we'd be at the office at 6 o'clock in the morning and then party till like 2 in the morning, and by the end of that, you guys are best friends. And some of my best friends came from that time. And even today, if I have to call up like, one of my buddies, co-CEO of Goldman Sachs International now, I can call him and just say, hey, I need help with somebody on your team. that network like maintains even 25 years in. I think Coinbase has done a good job of doing that. I think that they do a good job of bringing. They have an associate PM program that I think is really good. That they started mimicking some of the banks where they bring in this young talent with young blood that wants to do new things and create a little bit of that like a class of young people that may or may not stick around, but they'll have that network forever, and that like becomes a fabric you can kind of rest on. And so again, whenever I want to launch something new, see something new, okay, I want to think about a lending business. Like, who should I speak to? I can speak to a bunch of Coinbase alum, or I can speak to Coinbase. Like, that's great. I think they did a great job with that. I'd say Circle Mafia is also very interesting. There's a small group of us that like still chat all the time, and people are still at circles, people are outside of the circle, and it's just a different vibe, but it's a smaller circle, but also interesting.
Awesome. Like one of the things that I was really curious about, you've worked at two, one of the industry moving companies, and wanted to know like what led you to start your own company with True Markets, and what is it something different that you're trying to bring to the trading landscape?
Yeah, I'd say that like, especially post like Wall Street, post TradFi, my focus was always like, let me veer towards impact. Like, it wasn't always about the biggest check. It was like, let me see where I could have the most impact in the industries that I want to work in. And like, the reality is, and I'm probably a better entrepreneur than I am an employee, but like the reality is I'm a decent employee, but like, USDC was a white paper. I'm like, done correctly, this is a very big thing. Having my hands on, Coinbase's exchange business, when at the time it was very small, and it was like actually kind of like they treated it almost like a back-end database, not a business. Just having my hands on that felt like a big opportunity. I think even more so starting your own company in this like new world in the United States. We see a lot of things that went wrong in the initial phases of crypto, and we saw these evolutions of crypto, right? You saw the Coinbases and the BitMEXs of the world, and you see the FTXs of the world. And we know that with first principles, like probably the exchanges shouldn't be holding your assets. And we probably should be separating out execution and custody. And also like listings don't scale, right? Like we know that I tried to list as many as I could. We went from 20 assets to 235. At True Markets, we went from 6 assets to 99 assets in 2 weeks. And that's because we're leveraging DeFi rails, right? So we enabled SPL tokens, EVM tokens, base tokens soon. We'll be trading Bitcoin to a qualified custodian. So by the end of summer, we'll be on par with the other the other US enabled trading venues to buy things like Bitcoin spot, which is incredibly hard to get and incredibly expensive. You're still paying about 200, 250 basis points at these brokers. We can do it cheaper. We can do it better. We can do it safer. So these are huge opportunities when you think from first principles. And also like, I was high enough up at Coinbase to see that like the United States was either going to open up or it was going to be a dead zone. And we bet that it was going to open up. And the hedge at Coinbase was like, let's launch an international exchange out of Bermuda. But that became also like an opportunity to like launch things like Coin 50 and all these other opportunities. Like I'm like, listen, you can do so much more in a perps world that I can't do in a spot world. And with that same mindset, with the same like open door, open regulation things, clear regulations that we're seeing in the United States, like as a guy who, as a team, and Patrick is very much, my better half on this, my co-founder, my CTO, and we've been building stuff like this for 20 plus years. We've had our fingerprints on things like USDC and the Coinbase exchange business. I'm 45 years old and I'm willing to take the risk. Like the reality is also venture. There's a lot of venture capitalists and not a lot of great operators out there. And I consider myself a fantastic operator, and I want to do that. I want to go out, this is what I'm going to spend the next 10 years of my life on. And there's no better time to do it in a post FTX world, in a Trump clear regulation world. Like I want to run. And, honestly, a big company, as much as I love Coinbase, a big company, you're going to hit, you spend a good amount of your energy internally kind of convincing people that, there's like a thing we should try, versus like just like expending the energy externally and saying, let's just experiment. Like, I hope I fail half the time. That means I'm trying hard shit. And that's hard to explain sometimes to execs, especially at a publicly traded company.
That makes a lot of sense. And Vishal, this question we might have to cut this out, but where are you on like the Indian American scale? So like me and KG are probably like Indian, like, born and brought up.
Yeah.
And Ishan is probably like more American, but Indian, like he gets all the references. Where are you on that scale?
Let me ask how old you are first.
Me and KG both 20. He's 24. I'm 25.
And where you guys born and where do you guys live?
Both born in India. Both live in India.
Yeah. I mean, so I grew up I'm 45 years old. I grew up I was born in the 70s, for example, right? So I grew up in a world where, my parents were immigrants. They came to the United States. They came to middle America. I was born in the Midwest. And, my mother would tell me, she'd zip up my jacket on the way out the door in a cold Chicago, winter and say, just remember, you're American. You were born here. And, we spoke Hindi at home. I understand Hindi. I would say I'm definitely American first. I was born that way. They would want us to speak English at home. They would want us to, because that's the thinking. That was the thinking back then. They wanted us to be as American as possible. I have nephews now that are half Turkish, half Hindi, half Indian, and they speak Hindi and they speak Turkish, and they they can do both, and they're amazing, diverse, boys. We just grew up in a different mentality where at that time, my parents as immigrants, they moved there when they were 20, and just had a small group of people that, they would cling to. They wanted us to expand. They want us to be American first. So I think I grew up in a different generation than you did. And I also was born in America, in middle America.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to see this new wave of Indian American builders build in crypto and build really innovative things. I was Shriram, great example of this as well. I think that was a great detour. Maybe bringing it back to the land of DeFi. When did you come up with this main concept of it's an exchange, but it's non-custodial and we'll use DeFi rails? Can you sort of explain it to our audience in more sort of layman terms?
Let me explain what it is and what True Markets and the ethos is. I mean, the ethos here is we want to expand 24/7 markets globally to everyone. So, I've run securities businesses, I've run derivative businesses, I've run spot businesses, I've run lending businesses. But the reality is down to the retail, it's actually quite hard to use sometimes. So 24/7 ethos, for sure. We are a hard tech company. We have matching engines, we have CeFi, DeFi settlements, we have on-ramps, we have routing, we have all this stuff. And then we have this beautiful app on top, right? And the reality is that's very much like OpenAI. OpenAI for the longest time was just a bunch of APIs. And at some point, the two developers probably came together and said, let's just build this chatbot on top of it, plug the APIs in, and now it expands. And that's kind of our proof of concept of all of our APIs is our app. I would say what we are is we try to take the benefits of both CeFi and DeFi. So we make it super easy to onboard, on-ramp, buy, sell. And it shouldn't feel like I need to know my passcodes. I'm worried about my DeFi wallet. I need to worry about bridging. I need to worry about gas. We obfuscate all of that for the user. So if you want to take dollars and turn them into the next Trump token, we'll do that for you. If you want to go from Solana to Base to this to that, we take care of everything. You want to take your Trump token, sell it and buy some Bitcoin, we take care of it. And it's meant to be streamlined, but also, so again, hybrid CeFi DeFi is important. Stablecoin centric is important. There's simple things like fair fees. Some of these platforms just take advantage of their users. You buy $10 worth of stuff, you pay $1 worth of fees. That's it's 1,000 basis points. That's pretty crazy. We don't want to rip off our clients. There's an ethos around True Markets, around fair markets and things like that. And that's what we believe in. I don't think you have to. I think it's going to be white glove. It's not going to be cheap, but we're not going to rip your face off. And I think that I think what we're building is what, if you had to start from scratch and you want to trade crypto, securities, or anything else, you would build it the way we're building it right now. And I've been thinking about this stuff. I started my career on Wall Street in 2002 in electronic trading, and this is right when execution was really going electronic. And, at one point they handed me the keys to an options business that was doing nothing, and I ended up spinning it up. I know I have patents on trading UIs from 2000, I don't know, 10. Like it's like I've been thinking about markets my entire career, and this is just the culmination of all those things. Crypto happens to be like a hyper immature market structure and marketplace that's still trying to figure out regulation. There's only like 4 or 5 places that you can really buy Bitcoin in the United States, which is insane. If you want to buy like the next Trump token, like sure you can use Moonshot, but their fees are pretty crazy high if you're trying to do something like that. And if you want to go to a base or EVM token, you can't do that. There's all these like things that don't work at crypto right now if you just want to invest, and we can fix all those things. And so that's what we're doing.
Would you say the US market is like your primary launch market?
Yeah, it is. Okay. The app is only available in the United States currently. Primary launch, and also just like huge opportunity, right? Like we're Americans. You can see I live in New York. Like it's important for us to knock down the walls in the United States. I'm like, the one thing I'm really impressed with Brian and the executive team at Coinbase is they were just unwilling to give up in the United States. They said crypto has to exist here. We're gonna break down the walls and make sure it does. And the reality is, like, none of us would be here without Coinbase doing those things in the United States. And so with that in mind, like, yeah, I mean, I was part of the team that took Coinbase's spot market from 30% of US spot, 35% of US spot to 75% of US spot. And the reality is, like, we know that these are multiplayer, multi-winner games. Like, I want to, be in the market. I don't need to be the best. I don't need to be the biggest exchange. I'd love to be the best exchange. So.
Yeah, 100%. You recently kind of announced this new DeFi gateway for True Markets, and you just mentioned like it's now available for US, but plan is to kind of broaden the access. Can you kind of talk about the significance of launching that for on-chain markets? Like, what does it enable, and what does it mean, like DeFi gateway in general?
Yeah, so DeFi gateway is okay. So if you look at the United States, you have the Robinhoods of the world. You've got a couple other like retail brokers out there in the world, but the reality is there's like hundreds of them, and there's hundreds of ways to buy equities. And some of them are saying, let me enable Bitcoin. Let me go to like use Zero Hash or Paxos or something else and like enable Bitcoin. Maybe I'm doing Ethereum, Solana, and a couple other assets. But more and more, these like brokers saying to themselves, like, I missed out on the Trump token. They don't even carry it. They don't even list it. I can't enable it for my clients that minute, that second that it gets launched. When everybody was having their Trump dinner and the token launched, everybody was like caught flat-footed, right? And what we're doing with DeFi Gateway is leveraging like turnkey wallets for custody, leveraging our execution business, execution gasless, bridging, all the other things that we do. We can offer it to brokers. So there's retail brokers out there that are saying, hey, I don't want to miss on the next Trump token, the next DeFi wave, and I need to enable these things. And we're just a simple API that enables everything. We can get you leverage on ramps. We can get you again, execution and custody. We can do all that stuff for you. Yeah.
And then you're primarily just focused on spot markets right now. Are you going to think about perps in the future?
I'm a derivatives. I ran a derivative desk. I launched perps at Coinbase. Like, derivatives are my blood. I was trading derivatives while you guys weren't even born yet. So like, yeah. I will say, and I might, like, people may disagree with me on this, but like, I don't think the innovation is in perps. Like, if you look at perps innovation, the last innovation we had was using something like USDC, like a stable coin for collateral. BitMEX initially created perps, BTC perps with BTC collateral. And so you have a volatile asset acting as your collateral, which just like auto liquidates you all the time, right? So what one of the key focuses was get USDC to be collateral in things like perpetual futures. That was like the key innovation of FTX, if you think about it. FTX was futures trading exchange. The only thing that they did differently is that they used stablecoins, and they used USDC, which was the first stablecoin that they integrated as their collateral. Now perps, like, what's the next evolution? What's the next innovation in perps? Like, sure, you can do acquisition. You can like launch a billion of them, but I actually think options are much more interesting. So in my vision doc at Coinbase was always like, let's get the options. And they did so with the derivative.
Where do you rank like Hyperliquid on that spectrum of innovation? Like, don't you think it's like the next thing for perps, and them launching native stablecoins? Is that like the next thing, or like what are your general thoughts on Hyperliquid?
obviously they're a perpetual futures exchange, but I wouldn't say their innovation is like in the perp itself. A lot of their innovation is actually in the infrastructure. It's in like their own native tokens. It's like how they're like, and listen, I don't trade it. I'm in the United States. I don't trade perps, right? Like there's a bunch of reasons why I can't. I also don't trade like, I don't think you want an exchange operator that's actively trading on their own exchanges. And so I don't do that either. So I'm very careful about those things. But I would say Hyperliquid's obviously like swept the industry up. I think there's always a player that's doing something very interesting. There's someone like Coinbase or Binance will copy some of the features that make sense, similar to Facebook copying like a social media platform. I think there's a lot of innovation left in markets, and I think Hyperliquid is innovating in markets. I think like I was really happy to see like the prediction market world kind of find their legs. I think the teams at Polymarket and College are doing interesting things. There's like these innovative things. Now, at the same time, there's so many more things we have to do. Like these markets need to be fair. They need to be like, you got to know that you're not going to, you're not like trading at someone that has like advanced access or a look or like some sort of like, you don't want someone that's like, fair access is a huge, question in some of these markets. I would say I love what Hyperliquid is doing. I think that they're extending their own like platform with traders. So like you're seeing startups kind of building off of Hyperliquid, which is fantastic and really cool. Our goal here is to have a whole bunch of open APIs where like you could either like come inbound, you could white label our stuff. So DeFi Gateway is kind of the first version of that, where like we built some amazing infrastructure, but like, let's say you guys decide to quit the podcast game and you're like, I want to launch like a DeFi, brokerage in an area that we're not covering, or you want to create your own tilt on it. You could just leverage our infrastructure. You want to launch the next prediction market. You don't have to build your own matching engine. I'll give it to you. So that's our goal over time.
Is there like a key market that you hope someone builds on top of True Markets that you're very optimistic about?
Yeah, I mean, True Markets, like our goal is that we like cover all markets over time. But I do think that like things like securities and making those things go 24/7 is like really important, I think, in the United States, and also making them go global. Like, having the ability. So there's a little bit of legal, there's a little bit of technology. There's like all these things that you need to like wrap together to say, hey, like I want someone in Singapore to be able to trade like Tesla options. Like it's just impossible right now. But there's like, well, it's technically not impossible, and it's like legally like there's all these things that you just have to like jump through hoops. And the reality is like, as much as I love crypto, and I do love crypto, and people talk about wrapping assets and things like that, and we can go into that if you want. But like, the reality is there's so much more to trade, so much more to do.
What did you think of the X stocks and like the stocks on chain stuff that's been coming out?
Yeah, I mean, it's not much different than what like Sam Bankman-Fried was launching in 2020 and 2021, right? He had a business out of Liechtenstein that was like a brokerage that was like wrapping these things, and he created pre-IPO shares of Coinbase and all the other things that he was doing. That's also not innovation, right? So the funny thing is, people always ask me about wrapped assets and RWAs, and I always say that the reason why you want to wrap it, the only time wrapping an asset actually works, or like anytime it like really takes off, is when like the utility is higher than the risk associated with the tokenization. So $1 worked really well, right? There's high utility, like you can use it for collateral, you can like airdrop interest, you can like there's 100 things you can do with like $1, right? And the risk associated is actually pretty low. We've seen like obviously like a couple of runs, you've seen things, but like $1 backed like stable coin. I'm looking at USDC, I'm looking at PYSD, I'm looking at Tether even, like they're like, they have monthly attestations, there's trust there's risk there, but the risk is much lower than the utility. Now you look at like someone like wrapping a Reg NMS security, like really doing it, right? And following the United States rules and following Reg NMS rules and trading these in the United States, not just in Europe and wherever else, right? To do it really well, first of all, the utility is not very high, because you can't like actually use it as collateral because of Reg T margin rules and a bunch of other things that happen in the United States. And so what are you doing with this wrapped token? Like, what are you doing with your wrapped Tesla shares? What are you doing with it? Like, and then the whole idea of self-custody for something like a security is actually illegal. You need to be a broker to like hold the asset. Okay, so then your wallet becomes the broker, and then the AMM becomes the ATS, but then you have to follow rules. And like, so there's like all these things, like, again, very low utility and very high risk. So you're inviting the SEC directly into the business because it is a security.
And as someone building an exchange, and how hard is it like to bootstrap liquidity? I see that you guys have your own liquidity program and stuff. Like
Yeah.
in general, your experience at Coinbase as well, especially for spot markets, how hard is it?
Yeah, I would always tell the team at Coinbase, I had a pretty decent sized team at Coinbase. I would always say, when you can, like, build flow, then build markets, right? So like the one thing we're doing with our DeFi route right now is we're routing away. We use DeFi aggregators to route the order flow, but like as we get more and more order flow in, we can capture the order flow, whether through RFQs or whether through our own markets. And so your goal is to build flow, then build markets, right? And things like our Bitcoin will be trading on our native order books, but then we already have a little bit of retail order flow coming through our apps and some of our our DeFi gateway. You can start to like trickle in some of that order flow into something like our BTC books. And we also have like amazing market makers on our cap table that believe in us, that like know me from the past and said, if there's one guy that could probably crack open the US market, it's this guy. So we have a lot of people believe in us, and also just like build flow, then build markets, right?
And then, Vishal, do you want to talk a little bit about the options market? Like, I think historically, like Deribit's probably the only player that's had some success. What's your motivation behind like the next step of the vision chart being cracking the options market? And I think an extension of that is, why do you think people have failed building options markets?
Let's start there. So the only listed option market that really, really works is the U.S. listed equity options market. And it was started in the 60s and 70s for retail. And there was what's happened is you have like 12 to 15 exchanges. I forget how many now because I've been out of that market for a while. And they all are like trading the same tokens. They're trading the same options that are cleared by the OCC, centralized clearing, right? And all these markets have different market structures that are all kind of competing against each other. You have maker taker, like similar to crypto. You have taker maker that are sometimes backwards. You have pro rata. There's all these different like market structures that these exchanges have, and they're always vying for. And they're, by the way, very market maker friendly, meaning that is a quote driven market versus like a spot market, which is an order driven market. Very different, right? Quote driven market means that your market makers are coming in showing quotes all day, and it may never trade. Right? It literally just moves. There's a bid offer and it's not trading. If you have competition, people come in. There's like, it's a live market. It's a tight market. You can trade it. You can cross the spread as a retail user, and you're not going to feel like you get your face ripped off. Some of these platforms, some of these option platforms in crypto, their spreads are this wide, right? And the reality is, like, as a retail consumer that says, I know, like, let's say you're the smartest option trader in the world, you're retail, you're like, I know it's not, the price isn't here. The price is probably like somewhere in the middle. And the reality is maybe you'll get hit, maybe you won't, but the out loud price is terrible. So I think that listed markets in options, quote-driven markets, are actually incredibly hard. You have to build kind of a system of like competition that allows market makers to compete with each other, and potentially like even like unifying like the industry a little bit. And there should be many players kind of trading amongst like fungible like options in like essentially a cleared manner. I mean, that's the only way you really get great options markets, I think. Like, you can look at the US futures options world, and there's decent markets there, and there's other ways you can trade these things. And right now, obviously, like a lot of the crypto are going to ETFs, and you're seeing options on the ETFs and things like that will happen over time. And there's other ways to play it. I do think there's a lot of innovation left in the options world. I personally said I don't like to own things I can't write an option on, right? If I can't play the premium of like volatility, then why am I holding it? Especially in crypto, I think we haven't solved that yet. Yeah.
Awesome. And also, like, one of the things, because you've probably dealt with a lot of enterprise clients and these institutions, what's your take on this current TradFi adoption with DATs, and how are you kind of preparing as an exchange and different tooling to kind of support these guys when they come on chain? Because right now they're just buying the assets, right? They're not on chain. They may have tokenized different assets through securitize and stuff like that, but they're not really on chain and using those assets. But what are your general thoughts on them and how you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right now you have new technology being wrapped by old technology to launch into a equities market of sort, right? And the reality is like there's a couple reasons why that's happening. Number one, it's really hard to hold like spot. Like let's just talk about Bitcoin. It's hard to hold it. Am I putting in a ledger? Is there a qualified custodian behind it? Is it just being like, is it just being held in like a cold or hot storage wallet that could be like that could be hacked? Like what is the safety measures that are happening? And for average retail, that's like they're like, oh, I got to pay 300 basis points, 250 to 300 basis points. And then you look at the equity world where it's like, okay, Robinhood's like free. And like, these are like, okay, this feels like, a commoditized ETF, a commodity ETF. Like, does that just feel safer? I would say first, like our goal is to like bring down fees. Like fees should be cheaper in spot. There's like competition that hasn't happened in the United States yet. That's number one. We need to like maintain safety of these assets. So like something like Bitcoin should be held in a qualified custodian, even if you're retail, right? It shouldn't just be regulated to like the RIAs and brokers of the world. It should be for retail. If you're buying a Bitcoin, you have to ask yourself, is it being held in a qualified custodian in a trust company? If this thing falls apart, if the company falls apart, am I going to have to sue them to get my Bitcoin back? We've seen this happen, right? So if it's in a trust if it's sitting in a trust, you don't have to sue anybody. It just kind of like comes out, right? Now, once you make spot a little bit easier, then like I think these things get less attractive. I think this is just like a short-term hedge of like, or a short-term like arb of like, the market sees opportunity where they want to get long a bunch of crypto, and they see a lack of ability to do so natively. And I think as like a native crypto guy, I'd like to make those rails better. But on the other side, as a markets guy, I want to enable, equities at some point for sure, do it the right way, do it in an innovative way, and then enable whatever, the next, ETF or whatever comes out the pipeline.
And I think that's super interesting because, you mentioned that holding a crypto asset is really difficult, which is why these DATs may be seeing a lot of higher adoption right now. And you guys are obviously taking a bet on like the non-custodial route. Have you done like market research into like, do you think the next 5 years, US citizens will be a lot more comfortable holding assets in the non-custodial way?
I think it's purely technical. It's safer. It's not like, and when you're driving a company, when you're a founder of a company, there's like data-driven decision-making and there's gut-driven decision-making. And the reality is like, this is just safer, right? So like you see these things blow up all the time. You see exchanges blow up. We've seen it. You've been in the industry long enough. You see these things blow up. There's technical ways of making these safer, right? And, every founder that's out there should read this book by Tony Fadell called Build. And he talks about these like gut-driven decision-making moments and like these data-driven decision-making moments. Like one good one was like whether or not the iPhone should have glass on it. And Steve Jobs is like, it has to be glass. And their whole team's like, it can't be glass. And the reality was, he's like, well, they're like, well, he said, if you have an iPhone made of plastic and it's in your pocket and it scratches up, that's like our fault for manufacturing something that doesn't really just like can't exist in the real world. But if you have like a jewel with like glass on it and the user drops it, that's the user's fault. And the reality is like, that's like no data is going to tell you to do that. Right. So a lot of what we do at these early stages is gut driven. We use spark lines and charts, but like we'll enable charts as well. We use spark lines to enable like a user to look at a bunch of assets at one time and see what's breaking out. Like those are like gut driven decision making. Like you try something. Another favorite like Armstrong quote was like action breeds information, right? So like you just kind of you have to keep trying something and then seeing where it's going to go, and you find your information.
100%. What's next? What's next for True Markets? Is there anything community oriented you guys are doing? Anything that we can direct our audience towards?
Yeah, download the app. Number one, if you're in the United States, download True Markets. It's a black icon. True Markets with an S. We just launched DeFi Gateway yesterday, so that's coming out. So we're going to work with the brokers, the U.S. brokers in the world, and kind of enable those DeFi rails. We're going to focus on that for the next couple months. By the end of September, we'll be trading Bitcoin to a qualified custodian. So if you're a retail client, you can use our app and buy Bitcoin. It'll cost you like about 100 basis points versus like a 250 to 300 basis points somewhere else. We're going to hold it in a qualified custodian in a safer manner at a non-custodial exchange. It's just safer, better, cheaper. And then by the end of the year, we've got a big project. Hopefully will be announced by the end of the year. So we move quick. I mean, one of the things that like, I was competing directly with FTX, and one of the things that I saw from that team was their constant drumbeat of just like innovation, and like not everything hit, but like they were able to like innovate and get things out. And I think that speed of innovation is super important.
That makes sense. And we usually love to close these out with like number one advice for people, and you can structure this both ways, like your time at Coinbase, your time right now, or the advice that you'd give to people who are building on top of True Markets. What's like your number one advice for like exchanges and builders in general that are launching trading platforms right now?
Yeah, number one, I just in general, I'd say if you're young in your career, always veer towards impact. Like, where can you have the most impact? Where can you like really kind of spread your wings the farthest? Like, where like don't always chase the buck. Like, don't always chase like the fancy new thing either. Like, find something that you're really interested in that you think you can sink your teeth into and do so. That's number one. I would say in trading, exchange space, everything. Like, I would say, if you're building in the space, it's a good idea to bring in a couple of advisors that like listen. You can talk to people like me that will help you. I've talked to big exchanges that ask me like questions about like how do we really handle stable coins, or how do we really bootstrap some of this liquidity. And the reality is like there's such great people in crypto. I think reaching out to the right people is important. Again, veer towards impact, I think is my important.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vishal. This was awesome. Hope you guys soon launch it in India as well, so that we can start using it.
Sure.
But yes, so this is awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thanks, guys. See ya.